One of the techniques that's likely to challenge your students playing Final Quest are the slurred 16th notes. There are several passages in Final Quest that have slurred 16th notes, and when contrasted with the détaché 16th notes, we need to make sure that they also have articulation because even though they're slurred, we have to get them to somewhat match. So the first place where this occurs is right here in measure 12. We have alternating slurred 16th notes between the second violins and the violas. And one of the things that we need to do is make sure that the students are playing with a good left hand shape, because if they're playing with flat fingers or if they're squeezing too much or something like that, they're not going to get that articulation, they're not going to get that clean slurred sound that you want for a contest or festival if you're playing Final Quest. Now, these ascending 16th notes are going to be easier to practice because we can use tapping techniques with the left hand. That's where you take the bow out completely and you just tap the string and you try to hear each note as you're tapping it to make sure that the fingers are coming down firmly for that 16th note slur. In the violas, however, a lot of this is descending. So you're going to get a little bit of a sound when you pull off the string, but you're going to get the most sound when you strike the string with the left hand. So to stage this, I would practice both of those left hand only, just tapping the string. Once the students are able to tap comfortably in tempo and you can clearly hear all four notes, the next thing that you're going to want to do is add the bow. Now, I like to do tunneling exercises because I like to make sure that we provide some accountability to the left hand for keeping those fingers curved. If they're playing with flat fingers, they won't be able to do the tunneling exercises because they'll be getting whistles on the E strings in the second violin section and on the violas on the A string. So you're going to have them bow on the string higher than what they're fingering on. So for the second violins here, they're going to bow on open E while tapping the 16th notes here. And for violas, they're going to be bowing the open A while playing the same passage. And what this is going to do is just to provide accountability to that technique and make sure that they're having a good left hand shape while adding the bow. We're really heavy with the left hand. We've got a good left hand shape. Now we're ready to play on the same string that the students are fingering on. So we put those together. It's okay to start slow and ramp up the tempo. That's a good practice strategy. You don't have to do it at 110 every single time. You know, if they're playing sloppy at 110 and you just reinforce that, you're just going to reinforce the sloppy technique. So take the tempo down to where they can play it comfortably and with perfect technique. Not pretty good technique, but perfect technique. If it's not perfect, you got to slow it down more to make it easier so that they can focus on their technique. I don't want to forget to mention, but sometimes when we add the bow and things aren't going right, it's like, oh, well, I guess we need to go back to tapping, or I guess we need to go back to tunneling. Maybe not, because sometimes when we add the bow and we're focusing so much on the left hand, there can be problems with the right hand that creep in. So if you add the bow and you're immediately starting to have problems, I would check those bow holds and make sure that second violins and violas have curved pinky and thumb so that they're getting good tone with the right hand, because that is going to be the feel for their sound. And the left hand is only going to refine what the right hand is doing. So double check those bow holds, have them do some windshield wipers, and make sure everything's going all right there. The next spot's in measure 16, and in this section right here, we have first violins playing slurred 16th notes. They've got a couple of slurred 16th note right here, and they've got more in 17. I'd like to focus more on the bowings and on the notes in 17 and the bowings in 16, because this is a stylistic bowing, and we only have a couple of examples of this in this piece, and it's only in the first violin. So let's go over 17 first. Now, 17 does not work very well in first position. There's a couple reasons why. If you play it with an open A, the open A's are just going to pop out and you're not going to get a good phrasing. If you play with a fourth finger A, you're going to have two different string crossings, and that's not going to be great. Even if you play open A, you're still going to have two string crossings unless you end with the fourth finger A, which you should do. But actually, this works out very well in third position. If you shift up here to second finger on A, and you play this passage in third position, it falls much nicer in the hand. And if your first violins can do that, they're going to sound a lot better. Now, you practice this the same way. Shift up to third position and have them tap the notes with the left hand to make sure that they're using firm fingers. Okay? And then the same thing, have them tunnel on the E string. So they bow on the E string while they're fingering, okay? And as they shift up, sometimes students tend to flatten out the left hand even more, so it's a good idea to do those tunneling exercises to provide the accountability and make sure they're playing with good tone. Okay? When they shift up, you probably want to play a little closer to the bridge so that you retain that tone that you do in first position. And also, because it's melodic material, you probably want to be playing fairly close to the bridge anyway, because you want that melody to be able to cut through. It is just the second violins playing, but you want that melodic tone. So I recommend playing closer to the bridge anyway. When they shift up, you might want to move the bow a little closer as well. Measure 16, okay? So in measure 16, we got to figure out what to do about these two notes. The first one's marked sort of like portato, and the second one is staccato. But what I think is that they're supposed to be played the same way. Most of the time when I hear orchestras get to this measure, the E on beat 2 is played long, and maybe the and of 2 is played short. So how do we make both of these notes short? Well, the easy way to do it is just to brush off the string and brush 2 and the and of 2. So how do we set this up? How do we figure out how to get off the string, and then how do we figure out how to get back on the string for these last 4 notes in the measure? Well, what I like to do is I like to have them just practice the bowing. So we're just going to practice just in quarter notes, just down, down, up, which is basically what we have here. Down, down, up, down, up. The rhythm doesn't matter as much, so I have them bow it just as all quarter notes. The thing is, can they play those 2 down bows, and can they separate the second one from the first note and come off the string? So down, brush, up, down, up, right? Can they play that? That's kind of the starting place, okay? If they can do that, then, and again, I'm doing this at a slower tempo. I'm not doing this full speed yet. Just having everybody get used to the bowings. And don't just have your first violins doing this. Have the whole orchestra play it so they can figure out the technique too, because at some point they're probably going to need to learn how to get off the string, and this is a great way to teach them how to do it. So you get off the string for the second down bow, up bow, and then they have to set again for those slurs, and they got to do so in a way where they don't accidentally ricochet or they don't make a bad sound. And so you have to do it slow at first so they can make it very intentional, and then explore that until they have a mastery of it. And then you can add the left hand back in. Okay, 24 and 25 in the first violin. The recommended fingering is that you shift on the and of 4 here, and also on the and of 4 here. The orchestras that I've taught don't really do as well with that fingering. For sort of an intermediate level ensemble here, I like to have them play the whole tetrachord in the same position and then shift on beat 1 instead. It just makes that slur a lot cleaner, and we don't have to worry about having a shift in the middle of a slur. Students are mastering their shifting technique, but they might not have the lift shift set capabilities at this level than they will when they're approaching their latter years in high school. And so that's a fingering that works better for me. You're welcome to do what you'd like to do. Some orchestras don't even shift at all in 24. They just play it all in first position. A lot of judges can't even tell. You're probably going to be able to tell, though, if they don't shift in 26, because you got to get up to C somehow. I recommend 1, 2, 3, 4, and then shift third finger to C, just to make it easier. And a lot of 25 too. And another thing that's going to do is, because we have this crescendo taking place here, it's going to allow us to be heavier with the left hand and heavier with the right hand so that we can get up to that forte. And with that crescendo, the violins should be the ones leading the crescendo there. Okay, they should be leading the charge to that forte. And I think that's the best fingering to achieve that. But your mileage may vary. Similar technique to the other passages. Make sure that the left hand is firm. You can do tapping exercises, you can do tunneling. Well, tunneling is going to actually be a problem here because they're on the E string, but you can practice some E string exercises to make sure that the bow is doing what it's supposed to do as well. But there's similar ways to practice this as we practiced everything else. You can take this and you can pass it around to everybody in the orchestra and have everybody learn this run. You can have them learn it in position, you can have them learn in first position, whatever. And that way everybody's engaged in the rehearsal process and everybody's learning all the techniques, not just their techniques. All right, measure 45. In measure 45 here, this is, again, it's a place that works really well in third position. You can do it in first position, but there's a string crossing. But to be honest, for you, all the way back here in 40, you know, they're like, I'm going to have my students play this in third position. They're already going to be in third position anyway, and pretty much for the majority of this andante, they're going to be in third position. But if your students are not really comfortable with shifting and they're only kind of shifting when they have to and they're just kind of holding their breath and hoping it happens, then, you know, maybe that's not the best fingering for you. But if they are comfortable in third position, you know, that's going to work out pretty well. With just the slur, with just the 16th note slur here in 45, you can have them tunnel. You just can't have them tunnel on the A because the A is going to be on the E string there. So you can have your first violins practice some tunneling. All right, next is measure 57, which is right here. Now, 57, in my opinion, is the most difficult measure in Final Quest, technically speaking, you know, with the left hand. With the first violins, you know, they've had this pattern before. It shouldn't be an issue if they can play the pattern that they had in 45. You know, it's a different lead-in. Instead of having the F sharp E D, their lead-in is going to be D C D, and I have them play in first position up until this point where they shift on the slur. Now, you can do it, again, you can do it in first position, it's fine, but it's not as good for the phrasing, it's not as good for the tone, and it doesn't fall as well in the fingers as, you know, this third position fingering. Now, the second violin part is the challenging part, you know. Not just because they're second violins, it's just written harder, okay? It doesn't lie well in the fingers in first position, it doesn't lie well in the fingers in third position, so that leaves second position. And it works out pretty well in second position, but the problem is that a lot of students don't know second position, and a lot of times second position really isn't taught or reinforced, and we don't see it a lot in the concert music, especially not in this level. Typically, we see the odd number positions a lot more frequently, and, you know, until students are playing like, you know, Brahms and that kind of stuff, they might not have the exposure to the even numbered position. You know, Beethoven, you know, the Beethoven symphonies a lot of the times are in even numbered positions, but, you know, you can either get them comfortable playing in second position, or you're really going to have to woodshed and work on that string crossing to get them to be able to play, get comfortably into measure 58. You know, at some point, you probably need to be in first position anyway, because this material 59-60 works out a lot better in third position. So, you know, you got three choices here for 57 with your second violins, and well, practically speaking, you have a lot more choices than that, but for the purposes of this, three choices, okay? So the least optimal, I think, is in third position. I think that's going to be the hardest to make it sound the best that it can be, okay? Now, if first position is the only position they're comfortable in, well, maybe that's going to be the best that it can be, but, you know, coming down to third position, I think that's more optimal than first position. And I think if they're comfortable with that, they're going to be able to make that sound better because they're in position for this A here in measure 58, and they're probably going to be playing 59, 60, 61 in third position. Most optimal is second position, but it's probably going to be it's the most optimal, but it's probably going to have the lowest comfort level. So you're just going to have to manage that with those three options and pick what's right for that second violin section. Okay, so what didn't we go over in this video? We did not go over 16th note slurs in the cellos, and we did not go over 16th note slurs in the bass. And why not? Well, because in Final Quest they don't have them, which is why I like to take these exercises. You know, if you're going to woodshed it, especially if you're going to woodshed it in class, and I would recommend woodshedding it in class, because some students aren't going to take it home and practice, and some students need to have you model it for them so they know how to practice at home. And so I would do a little bit of woodshedding with groups like this just to get them going. But, you know, what are the cellos and bass players going to do to learn this technique? And so I would definitely give them the 4 notes that you're working on and have them play along with the orchestra and see if they can use the same techniques. You know, see if they can try some tunneling, see if they can have firm fingers and really articulate with the left hand, and see if they can manage the bow while doing all of that. All right, so we've got the détaché 16th notes, we've got the slurred 16th notes. That covers a lot of the technique, particularly the left-hand technique, and a lot of bow technique too. Now we're going to start looking at the form and structure of Final Quest, and we're going to talk about how that creates problems. And, you know, knowing the form and structure of a piece can give you some tips into where the problems are going to be. A lot of the times problems in pieces happen around the transition sections, the tempo changes, that kind of thing. And so if you know where the A theme is, you know where the B theme or exposition development, however it's written, it's going to help you figure out what's probably going to go wrong with that orchestra. And if you've got a lot of class time to sit and figure it out, you know, that's great. But sometimes, you know, you might get invited to conduct at a clinic or a festival or something like that, and, you know, you might not know the piece. You might get your music right before you get on the plane, and, you know, you're looking at it on the flight up, and, you know, you got to figure out the most efficient way to rehearse it and get it done within the limited amount of time at that clinic or festival. And understand the transitions and stuff are going to really help with that. And so in the video, we're going to look at the structure of Final Quest and the problems that are created from the structure, and how to rehearse to make the group sound great.